Hello, folks. Welcome to our discussion about how the pandemic has changed online and hybrid learning. My name is John Watson. I'm with the Evergreen Education Group. We have been involved in K-12 online, hybrid, and blended learning for about 23 years now. We run the Digital Learning Annual Conference and the Digital Learning Collaborative, which is the association of lots of different online and blended and hybrid schools, including StrongMind, who is hosting this webinar, and our panelists are folks that we've been thrilled to have been working with for many years. Really, really glad to have them on today. I think you're going to find that they have incredible experience and knowledge, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of their ideas. What we want to talk about today is it's very clear that the pandemic, which started just about a little over 3 years ago, hard to believe that it's been 3 years since then, very clearly had sudden and drastic impacts on K-12 education, with in-person learning being shut down in spring of 2020. In the fall of 2021, the continued disruption with lots of schools and districts using a variety of strategies, including different flavors of remote learning and online learning and hybrid learning, to keep students and faculty and staff safe. Lots of districts started online and hybrid schools during that time. At the same time, a lot of districts already had online and or hybrid and blended schools in place then as well. Our panelists today are a mix. Some folks there, Michelle and Tracy and Dan, all have many, many years of experience in our field going back pre-pandemic, but their programs to varying degrees either emerged or changed somewhat during or right after the pandemic, and that's going to be a big part of our discussion today. We encourage you to use the chat window to drop in questions or comments. We will be watching the chat window and keeping an eye on the discussion and addressing any questions that come up. I'm going to start with some quick introductions and then be putting some different questions to the panelists. Panelists are used to doing this. I know I've had the pleasure of chatting with you all, but we'll start with some quick intros and then have quite a bit of back and forth. And I encourage you to just jump in as the discussion gets going and address each other's questions and comments as much as my questions. With that, I'm going to start. Tracy, could you tell us a little bit about who you are, what your school is, and where you're joining us from today?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Tracy Kornstrom. I'm the director at Wolf Creek Online High School. So I am in Chisago City, Minnesota. I'm the director of a hybrid high school, 9 through 12 high school, with about 250 students. So Chisago City is just an hour due north of St. Paul and Minneapolis. And we just had a contest. There was a very large snow bank in the parking lot, and the last of the snow melted yesterday. So there is no snow, hopefully no more coming. And our Phy-Ed teacher did win the "What Day Will the Snow Melt" contest. So we're in Minnesota with no snow, so we're pretty happy. So glad to be here.
You know, I neglected to mention where I'm joining you all from, Durango, Colorado, Western Colorado. And Tracy, sounds a little like you. We have had a never-ending winter. You can still see snow outside my window. You have to look a little ways, but there's a peak within sight, not too far away, and we're wondering when that is when we're going to lose the last of our snow. Michelle, let's go to you next.
Hi, I'm Michelle Eaton. I am the director of Warren Online Academy, which is a K-12 online and hybrid public school in Indianapolis, Indiana, within the Metropolitan School District of Warren Township. And also no snow, but that's not news here.
Excellent. Dan Milan, do you have snow there in the Phoenix metro area?
You don't shovel sunshine, John. That's what they say in Arizona all the
time. Tell us a little bit about your school.
Sure. We are a 6 to 12 public charter school, intentionally hybrid. in Goodyear, Arizona. We serve, the way it works in Arizona, you can come to pretty much go to any school in the area. There's a lot of charters be around, a lot of competition for schools. And yeah, we offer a fully hybrid experience for kids in the area.
Each of you has an extensive background in education. Dan, I'm going to go back to you and then go to Michelle and Tracy, just to talk about, to give folks a sense for your background. Dan, how long has it been that you're now at Valor since you escaped the kind of winters with snow in them?
Yeah, so this is year 33 in the business, but this is year 3 in Valor. So I was about 30 years in public ed in traditional public school in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and Ephrata, Pennsylvania. As one of the admin team, I spent 18 years in the classroom and then the rest in administration, building out online hybrid lab settings, those kind of things within the public school setting.
Michelle, I'm going to go back to you all in reverse order. You've been in traditional public schools for a while. Can you tell us about your journey?
Yeah, I'm not going to give specific numbers. That's yeah. I started out.
Charm, Michelle.
I started out as an elementary school teacher, and then online learning kind of accidentally fell into my lap. It was not the plan. But when I pursued a master's degree, I picked the online one because I thought it was going to be easy. And I feel like this is confession. Fortunately for me, and the reason that I'm sitting here is that I was very wrong and I had this really rich experience. And so much so that I couldn't stop talking about, this is the kind of learning all students deserve. And squeaky wheel gets the job. So I have been in online learning for about 11 years. And then Warren Online Academy, I moved over here. We're pretty new. This is year 2. Last year was our first year, and we were a program within the school district where students were concurrently enrolled in a traditional school and with us. And then we grew so substantially that we became our own public school with a state number this year. So that's been our journey. It's been really exciting. I think with Warren Online Academy, it certainly was. The pandemic was a catalyst that allowed for this to happen, but I'm in a school district where the plan for creating an online and or blended school has been a part of the strategic plan for a while. And just with funding and then the right kind of few ingredients mixed together, we were able to build that last year.
Michelle, was the plan for the school in place pre-pandemic?
Not officially. It was one of those like pie in the sky dreams. They had my school district back in the day won one of the Race to the Top grants and focused on blended learning and personalized learning. So all of that work really set the groundwork. They knew that this was something that they wanted to do, but we didn't put it into place till after. And
you mentioned the growth. I was taking some notes. I don't remember. Did you mention how many students you have in your first answer?
Right now we have just over 800 students.
And how big is your district? What's the student enrollment in the district roughly?
About 13,000.
Yeah, so that's a considerable percentage of students that you're getting into your school. I might come back and talk about that a bit. Well, we will actually. It'll touch on the types of students you have, which we will return to. Before we do that, Tracy, what was your journey to end up at your school?
Yeah, I've been at Wolf Creek. I was the first director and founded the charter school 21 years ago. And prior to becoming a public charter school, we were a school within a school in our local district, Chisago Lake Schools. So they currently are our authorizing agent, authorizer, which is a really unique situation in Minnesota. At one point, there were 7 or 8 public school districts that were authorizing. We're down to 2. My school and then a school in Northfield. So a really interesting mix of that we are our own public charter school, but working with the district for services. So we've been here for about 22 years from that school within a school model. Prior to that, I spent a couple years at a local district in their ALP model and doing homebound instruction, which I thought was really interesting. I always said I really liked going individually to students' homes prior to virtual and online. You know, you would pick up books because students would be out sick or, have an illness or something and need to be homebound. And I was like, there has to be a richer, broader experience, but this one-on-one work with students was really interesting. So somehow that brought me, to Wolf Creek, which was probably meant to be, and have been here for quite a while.
And Tracy, I suspect most viewers will know, but can you just define and talk a little bit about ALC?
Yeah, like an area learning center. So, I mean, usually, our school was very vibrant after school program. So students may have gone to their local high school during the day, but needed to make up credits at night. But other students were full-time in the program in the evenings for a variety of reasons. They maybe were behind on credits, or they may have been young parents themselves, or doing things during the day like a mental health treatment program or a chemical assessment program. So just working with students really individually and finding that we didn't have 30 students in US history, that they were all at different levels from assessment standpoints, seemed to work really well as we moved into the virtual world, and having a professional, growth plan for each student, which we have at Wolf Creek, an individual graduation plan, seemed to lend itself from that environment pretty well.
You've mentioned a couple of things I want to dig into. One we'll do now, one we'll come back to. The one I want to dig into a bit is the fact that your charter school is authorized by the district and you have a close working relationship with the district. Can you talk more about that and some of the history, both maybe a little bit of the history behind it, and then what does it mean in terms of some of the partnering that you do with the district for student services?
Yeah, there is a lot of collaboration, and there are really two different pieces that we try to be very clear about, in that the district is our authorizer or authorizing agent, and they are oversight in many ways and work with us as a public charter. And there are other authorizers who do just that. But then we also have a services contract with the local district, which is a bit unique. Some charters have similar things with authorizers, but since we have a school district, it allows our students to play sports and be involved in activities at the local high school. There is a frenzy at the front desk right outside my office because prom is on Saturday. And we have 15 kids going to prom. They were invited, the local high school, we collaborate with them. We send chaperones, and then our students are able to attend the prom. So, opportunities that in a really small virtual charter might not be available to students, sports and activities being top of mind, but we get school lunches from them. We use custodial services from them. And then through the service agreement, they're a small rural district that has had a hard time passing a levy. So, the service agreement, we pay them money. We just went and looked at that agreement again. So it does benefit them in ways, because like their school board will look and say, 40% of our students would have come from this district, but 60% come from other districts. And then you're paying us a portion of your state aid for services. So it's a business model that has worked well for a lot of years, that people have come and looked at and replicated in different ways.
Thank you, Tracy. Michelle, I'm going to go off script here because I'm curious, a question I didn't think to ask you before. So does your program serve any out-of-district students, and if so, roughly what numbers, or is it largely or almost entirely Warren students?
Yeah, great question. So we do open it up to out-of-district students. As a matter of fact, throughout the school district schools, we will accept out-of-district students. The limitation there is that they have to be able to provide transportation. And when you're an online student, that's not necessarily an obstacle, except for things like testing. So yes, we do accept out-of-district students. In our second year, I have about 7% of the student population is outside of Warren Township. So the majority, which is it's a considerable amount of 800, but the majority are still within the school district. I would say my long-term goal is to see that number rise as a way to allow students to choose Warren Township. But we haven't done any specific marketing in that direction. So this has just happened by word of mouth.
Yeah, interesting. And it will be interesting to see how that grows over time, especially I'm hearing about some other, they're called corporations in Indiana, right? Not districts, school corporations.
Some are corporations, some are townships, districts.
Okay. I'll just call them districts. More interest in districts in Indiana starting their own, some of them starting their own programs as well. I will just mention for those who are joining us today, a couple of messages in the chat about a bit of technical issue with names, but if you have the chance to rename yourself, please feel free to do that. And also feel free, please, to introduce yourself in the chat window. Let us know where you're from and if you have any questions, comments, etc., that you would like us to get to. I want to, a couple more questions I want to do to set up the discussion around how has the pandemic really influenced what you're doing. But a couple of things I want to get to before we do that. One is interested in hearing about the extent to which you are fully online versus having some online component. And Dan, I'm going to go to you first in a moment. To what extent are you fully online? To what extent do you have some sort of on-site component? If you're on-site, what does that mean in terms of what you're trying to do with on-site versus online, that sort of thing? Dan, you call Valor a hybrid school, so I know you got a lot of on-site as well.
We do, yeah, intentionally hybrid. I've had to start adding the word intentionally hybrid after the pandemic, as a matter of fact, just because it's, you know, so many people had to do some version of it. But this is something, you know, that we've been kind of planning for a while, and I've been working with for since I was in Pennsylvania. As you would know, John, we talked about that ability to, you know, for teachers to create curriculum and teach it and link it and those kinds of pieces that were so challenging. And so I was offered the opportunity to come out to Arizona and said, what kind of schedule would you like to run if you want to run a hybrid school with supported curriculum, with our Strong Mind stuff that's supported and get teacher lesson plans in there? And I said, well, if I had to lay it out, this is what it would look like. And that's what I got to do. So for us, it's all about that instructional model. We believe that the human is the most important element in our hybrid experience, so that we can give kind of, we give the Google what is Google's, or the online to online, and to humans what is human. So our students have to be there from Monday through Thursday for 4 hours a day. And then in the afternoons, they tutor with them. So the tenets of our program are high-level tutoring, high-level relationships, high-level in-class activities. So we let the strong mind lay the foundation, and then the humans set the ceiling, set the floor, and then the humans set the ceiling for what can be done. So when they're with them for those 4 days a week, they elevate the curriculum that's been done. It's hooked together with their teacher resource guide, the resources that come in the curriculum. And so they work with the kids doing that those 4 days. And then in the afternoon, they tutor with them with those same teachers they have. And we have a very uniquely a nine week condensed courses that kind of fit the model we want. So that's middle school does 8 to 12, and then high school does 12 to 4 face-to-face. And the opposite sides of that, they tutor with the teachers. So yeah, that's how much they see them. And then Fridays are for clubs, tutoring, relationship building. It's optional to come on site. And even at 12 o'clock when middle school leaves, the kids can go home or stay and get help.
And so Dan, just to, first of all, I love the intentional hybrid that you mentioned. And as you're explaining that, it absolutely is clear that that's very intentional and well thought out. So if I am curious though, when we think about online, there's such a, online schools are obviously driven by a lot of students' interests and flexibility, scheduling flexibility, and that sort of thing. So I'm curious if you have a student who might be traveling for a bit. I guess what I'm asking, is that an absolute requirement? Is it required because of state funding, because you require it as from the instructional model, or to what extent is there flexibility that, let's say, wouldn't typically exist in a traditional public school, often because of seat time and funding requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for bringing that up. It's actually the beauty of one of the things I really like about our system. We have what is known as gradual release as well. So like when a student, they'll be with us for a little while, and once they show they've got that interdependence and independence that is required to kind of work within the system, that they certainly may, and it's kind of the beauty of what we do, they may flex out their time. For example, we have a girl who is a piano player. She does it worldwide and she's incredible at it. We have the tennis players. We have guys who just we have baseball players who need to be away for a month at a time. So it's really nice because we can just flip that switch because they're face to face with us. But there's always that online piece going through it. There's always that foundation that's been set, that guaranteed curriculum. So when they go to travel, when it's time for them to travel, they just do the online pieces, and the projects are all built into that. What they would take away, then what we do is they kind of just uncheck the playlist that they would be doing with the teachers. We run a station rotation piece with playlists, transparency being one of the important elements of our program. Kids can see what's due for weeks at a time, but we would undo the things that require collaboration in the classroom at the time. And so they can just do the online piece, then they get back, they jump right back into our system as if they hadn't been gone.
I love the way you're talking about that integration between online and on site. Tracy, I'm going to go to you next. Before I do that, I'll mention thanks to the folks who have posted in the chat. Welcome from folks in California and Oklahoma, and please do post questions, comments, etc. We are keeping an eye on that. Tracy, 100% online, some on-site. What does that look like for Wolf Creek?
Yeah, we say that we're a hybrid model, and it does look really different for each student. I had mentioned we have those individual graduation plans. So we have a campus in Chisago City, and students really make the choice whether they're going to come to campus on Tuesdays and Thursdays or not. We talk a lot about there are not bells. We're open from 7:30 to 3:30. We're open a couple Thursdays a month later till about 7 p.m. So students can come in more of a drop-in, like a college campus environment if they need office hours or need to talk with teachers. Since the pandemic, we've seen a rise in, even though we've been around a long time, students' comfort in doing those things virtually and being in Google Hangouts with teachers and not coming in as much. We have seen a drop in the number of students coming into campus, but really students and families decide what their level of comfort is. We have some students who come every single Tuesday and Thursday, and sometimes they're younger students and their parents say, I'm okay with you having a virtual option, but I feel like you need that structure of being in school. Things happen asynchronously on campus, but we have activities. We started a chess club this year and they met at 11 o'clock today. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we're doing some large coloring projects and art projects. So there are things happening on campus for students who are interested. Campus is not required. We say it's recommended for you to come for the time that you need, but we also have a virtual campus option on Mondays and Wednesdays that's staffed by paraprofessionals and teachers, where students who are further away or have transportation issues. We live in a fairly rural area, so we don't have a lot of public transportation. Even students who live 1 or 2 towns further, if they don't have their own vehicle, would not be able to make it to campus. So those are things that we work with and work on in the areas that we're in, but students do choose. And we have students who come to graduation, and we have a very strong advisor model. I completely agree with what Dan said. It's, you know, that human element. I think when people start virtual schools, they think the curriculum and what learning management system I'm going to pick is going to be the key to success. And I think you look to people who've done that for a long time, because it is that human element and the social emotional learning elements that people are seeking. So we just work with each student from what we feel like they need and are looking for. And obviously, if they choose to not come to campus, not come to virtual campus, and they're not doing any work, then we'll meet through our advisor model, our teacher advisor model, and highly suggest that, you know, we say you can work at home independently as long as you can work at home independently. And if you can't, then we'll be having a progress meeting about all the supports that we can put into place for you to come in. But But we do have a lot of students on campus each day, and for those not in Minnesota, it's Minnesota Wild Fan Day today on campus because Minnesota Wild are in the Stanley Cup playoffs tomorrow. So so it is that I think the perfect mix of having students on campus and having that strong curriculum option behind them.
I was choosing between my DLC and my Colorado Avalanche Zoom background for today. I went with DLC since the Avalanche lost last night and they seem on the verge of getting out of the playoffs in the first round. You mentioned a couple other things that I want to come back to around the education plans and the advisors, and that this human element, and Dan in the chat window posted about human interaction as well. I think there's a lot to talk about there. Before we do that, Michelle, online hybrid, where does Warren come in on this?
So Warren Online Academy, being kindergarten to 12th grade, our model varies based on the grade level of the student. So, I mean, right now it's state testing. So I have all of my 4th, 5th, and 6th graders in the building right now doing that. So everybody comes to the building at some point. But kindergarten through 8th grade is primarily virtual. It's actually bicronous learning, so a mix of that synchronous and asynchronous, where we rely on the asynchronous, the student-paced learning for a lot of our initial instruction, and then our live instruction is pretty targeted and personalized based on the data we receive from that. Our kindergarten through 8th grade students are invited into the building once a month on what we call a Jog Friday. So in Warren Township, our portrait of a graduate, we refer to as journey of a graduate, represents the skills and dispositions we want all of our graduates to leave Warren Township with. And so our Jog Fridays are days where students are invited in for hands-on experiences around the curriculum. It's completely optional, but it replaces what they'd be doing online that day. And so we can have a lot of really rich experiences. We had a science fair at our school last week or 2 weeks ago. And so I'm headed to the district science fair with some of our kiddos after this, actually. So we try to create those opportunities in person, but for our youngest students, it's primarily optional. And a lot of that had to do with listening to our stakeholders. What we found was interesting as we were thinking about the model, that the parents of our youngest students, for the most part, were interested in online. They wanted their kids at home. And so when we started thinking about hybrid, we looked at that for our high school. So our 9 through 12 is hybrid. We have hybrid pathways. So if you live outside of the district, it's not required. They can opt into synchronous Zoom check-ins with their teachers instead. And we schedule it so our freshmen come in 2 half days a week for in-person kind of targeted support. Sophomores are scheduled to come in 1 half day, and then our juniors and seniors are allowed to opt in or out as long as they're in good academic standing. And then what we found is we've added flexibility around that. So I have some juniors who come in every single day of the week. We don't turn anyone away outside of their days. So every day we have students of different ages here in the building, and really leaning into the flexibility of that has been positive for us.
You touched on an idea, and actually Tracy touched on this a bit as well. It's interesting to me, in my mind, sometimes the synchronous, asynchronous, and online on-site can get somewhat conflated. I mean, when I put it that way, it's clear those are different things, right? There's no question about that. But it can be easy to think, okay, face-to-face means synchronous, online doesn't, and that is mostly true. Online doesn't mean synchronous, which is mostly not true. In fact, it seems like one of the changes that we've seen across a lot of online schools post-pandemic has been the addition of a lot more synchronous, and so it sounds like, Michelle, that's a fairly important component of your school's instructional strategy. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so we say even for our K-8 students, they don't spend a great deal of time every day live in a Zoom classroom, but every student has an academic checkpoint with a teacher every day for our kindergarten through 8th grade. So whether that's a small group instruction, whether that is a larger group class, every day the students meet with a teacher about academics in addition to their homeroom.
Yeah, excellent. We have first question coming in. Saw somebody else introducing himself, Brandon from Oklahoma. Thanks, Brandon. We've got the question that's coming. I'd love to put it to any and all three of you. Unfortunately, it's one of those glitch names, so it's we're not sure who it's coming in from. But ensuring academic integrity when students are taking exams and assessments online. Michelle, I'll go back to you since you're more online, but I'll have Tracy touch on that as well, and Dan, if you'd like. I don't know, Dan, how much you rely on the on-site for exams, but Michelle, academic integrity.
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? I think there are lots of components to this. I think I could talk all day about the things that we do instructionally that ensure academic integrity. One of the things I think is really most important to know is what the research says about academic integrity in any classroom. That a bigger determiner of whether students are going to be dishonest in their work has more to do with the proximity of the teacher and less to do with the environment which they're learning. And so what I mean by that, in a face-to-face classroom, a student is more likely to whisper the answer to a neighbor, text it to them, pass a note if the teacher is sitting at their desk versus a teacher up walking around the room. It's the proximity to the learning and not necessarily the fact that they have the tools with them, their phones, their paper, to cheat. And in the same kind of similarly online, the research tells us the same thing is true, but it's less of a geographic proximity and more to do with the perceived proximity. So a teacher that is active in the course, that is responding, that a student feels closer to that teacher and they're closer to the learning than if they are disengaged. And so it's not the fact that they have Google available to them or that they are physically away from a teacher. It has more to do with the proximity of the learning. So I think really focusing on that, it's not a silver bullet. It doesn't get rid of cheating in any environment, but I think that's really important to know. Of course, there are software and things you can do. You can proctor exams in person. I often find that one of the best things you can do to ensure academic integrity is to make sure that all of your assessments aren't just quizzes at the end of a unit. And more importantly, the larger the stakes of an assessment, the higher the chances for cheating for anyone. And so the more often you can create short formative assessments, formative non-graded assessments, the clearer picture you get of who the student is, what they understand, who they are as a writer, that allows you to identify academic dishonesty later. But it also lowers the stakes. A student is less likely to cheat on a lower stakes or no stakes quiz. So I think there's not one single answer that's going to fix it, and we still have lots to learn, but there are a lot of different things that work together, I think, that can help you feel really confident that the results you're seeing, the data that you have, is valid.
I love that point about proximity and how you built on the fact that doesn't necessarily mean geographic proximity. Tracy, how does Wolf Creek think about academic integrity?
Yeah, we've talked about that for a long time, and I think we've had that question for, the past 22 years. And I think it does go back to that human element. We start with an essay, an entrance essay. That does not mean they do or don't get into the school. We're a public charter school, but work samples, and then having an advisor who is a content teacher who knows the student well. So I just went at the Digital Learning Conference in Austin to an AI a session that talked a lot about having reflective practice, having essays, and my staff and we have talked for a really long time about, if you ask students even 20 years ago, give me a 250-word biography on a historical figure, they're going to be able to find it on the internet. But if you say to them, compare and contrast one of these 5 historical figures' lives with your own life and your struggles and their struggles, that's going to be pretty difficult to find. So we know that it's the way that we write things. We are very open about the end of term quizzes, beginning of term quizzes are open book and open note. We don't proctor. And then we have summative assessments that are much more personalized. We do have an academic integrity policy that just says if the work does not look like your work, we use Turnitin. We use other software products that are trying to keep up with AI. Then we can ask you to come to campus or virtually to be proctored and have a test or an essay that looks and sees the credibility of your work. I'll admit we've had that more times this year than we've had in the past, probably, 6 to 8 times. And sometimes students just, want to cut and paste things and it will say right in their work, like, I am a machine. Thank you for asking. And they don't, they don't proofread it. So we've had some fun this year with that. And I think we're all just trying to keep up with it. And looking at those different pieces, but I really think getting to know students, knowing what their writing sounds like. And I think what Michelle said too, if it's multiple choice and it's able to be found on the internet, they're going to Google it. But sometimes I'll even say, if it's a 20, 30 word quiz and they're taking the time to Google it, find the answer, search for the answer, write A, B, C, D, that might be better than just guessing. And then in the end, if they come in and do more, we'll look at it. So those are the pieces that we've looked at and we're still learning. I know I have a lot of teachers talking about doing summer curriculum writing to make things even more reflective and moving away from the things that are more rote as much as possible. But in virtual, you're still going to have some of that for sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Tracy. Dan, how do you think about academic integrity?
Yeah, for me, it's all about, well, actually, I would say, I think for anybody, it's about aligning your system's goals. And I think making sure all the pieces reflect those goals and the tenets of your program. For example, when we looked at grading at Valor, I got to decide how it was going to lay out, we had to decide what pieces were going to go to strong mind, which pieces were going to go to the human element. So we actually tiered it down. Again, we did a 60-40, 60% of our grade comes from the human side and the face-to-face interaction. Or I should say what they have to produce that way, and 40% comes from the strong mind side. But of that 40% of that grade, the smallest piece is the final exam. The second smallest piece, so it's like 5% for the final exam, 10% for the exam for exams altogether. But the pieces that weigh more are the formative assessments along the way. Are you checking in? And any kind of, and the projects, so our projects in all of it are 30% projects and 30% the playlist. So those are all authentic assessments. So the whole key is to get a good set of performance-based assessments and then kind of say, okay, this is what we need to be able to do, and you need to be able to produce it. If they're doing a video, if they're creating things, there's just no way to cheat on that side of it. It's going to be really challenging. If you build a good, authentic base, a performance-based assessment, and Jay McTighe does a really great job of laying out what good performance-based assessments are. That I think it's going to be a real struggle. And let your grades, as I think Tracy said, don't force them into, or maybe that was Michelle who said, don't force them into that really tight moment where, like, hey, today you're going to take a test and it's 80% of your grade or 60% of your grade.
Yeah.
Good luck today. You know what I mean? But there's you still have to perform, and you still have deadlines, and you still have all those things that build a great student and that profile of a graduate. Having those things in place help guide a system, and then all the other systems flow through that, and your grading should reflect all that as well, which includes, all right, this piece we're going to give to the objective side, this is the subjective piece, and we're going to weight that as much as we want to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dan, I want to go right back to you, because we also got this question about what do you do if students don't show up when they're supposed to, and I, show up can mean in a physical school or in an online environment, right? So
It doesn't change.
but
It doesn't change.
I took that question as on site, but you three can choose to answer it however you'd like. So
Sure.
Dan, start with you. What do you do?
Yeah, and it happens all the time, by the way, and hybrid's no different. People don't show up. They're like, oh, well, you said we could do this piece online. I'll just stay home, because it's Tuesday. We're like, no, that's not the way our program works. I think so much of it begins with outlining your program and having the why built into why they have to come on site or why they have to be there, and having them sign that agreement. And I know in Pennsylvania, so the constraints are part of the deal. our school was paying over $1 million out to cyber charter schools. So one of my jobs in Pennsylvania was to stop the bleeding there and have the kids go less and win back some of that money and bring the kids back who had left and offer an education to match what we were doing face to face and using the online pieces. And then when a kid doesn't follow through, you have some real tough questions to answer. Are you willing to tell somebody that they can't be part of your program because they're not following through with the model you've created? And the answer has to be yes in the end of that for me. It was like, so we can't kick kids out of Valor because they don't come on. Like, it's just, you really can't just kick kids out of a public school, and we're a public school, but we can increase the amount of requirements we have for them and say, hey, you're not following through on this, and make sure that our grading matches. Hey, in order to get the grade you need to be on site for this piece. So there's a few pain points that we build in along the way that say, if you're not following the model, this isn't going to go well, and this isn't going to go well. But if you do, it's going to go really well. We're going to help you over these humps and kind of tell them why, because we believe that this face-to-face piece is essential to us knowing how well you're going to do and being able to diagnose how well you do. When you meet with a doctor, you have to have that moment, even whether it's online or face-to-face in person, where you diagnose the situation. And without that diagnostic piece and us hearing from you, we can't get a great read on your student. And if that's the case, we've got to make some bigger decisions and know that in our case, the grade will reflect, you know, how well you've aligned to our system and how well you follow through with it.
That all makes a lot of sense. And an interesting perspective. I was thinking about when you were saying you can't force kids to show up. I'm going to think more about about that. Michelle, when you think about kids showing up, what does that mean in the online environment? And how do you think about engagement, and how do you get kids to show up and be engaged?
Well, and attendance has been a big focus for us, and attendance, I feel like, doesn't do it justice. I think when we talk about engagement, it has to be more than just showing up, and it has to be about real academic engagement. But we've taken a really serious approach to that and seen a lot of success. And ultimately, in Indiana, we have a law that states that any virtual student who is chronically truant must be withdrawn to their school of residence. So we cannot hold on to students who are not attending. But my thoughts on that, though, I think often in online spaces, you hear a lot about whether kids are ready for online, or does this student have the skills necessary to be successful online? And I struggle with that thought, because it's a thinking that is asking students to come ready for us and for adults not to come ready for the students. And we don't ask in in-person classes, oh, well, you know, this student isn't ready to sit still and pay attention, so they're not good for an in-person school. We don't have those conversations, because it's our responsibility to teach students to be prepared for whatever environment they're learning in. And so we take a 3-tiered approach to attendance and engagement. And that first tier is really focused on positive behavior supports. And it's also focused on building those self-efficacy skills, the self-regulatory skills that we see when students are successful online. Part of that is that we have hired an online success coach at our school who works in all tiers, but she works really closely with teachers and with students, and helping them. How do you teach kids to be good managers of their time and organized, and how to build a schedule for themselves and that kind of thing. So we really invest a lot proactively. And even little things like we'll have little campaigns where we're all sending handwritten postcards to students telling them we can't wait to see them. Those little things are all about relationships, and they matter. They matter everywhere, but they really matter online, because we have to be so much more intentional about building relationships. So we have a pretty strong focus on tier 1. And then as we move through tier 2 interventions and tier 3, where we help build attendance plans, we have them meeting one-on-one with the online success coach and checking in. We have check-in and check-out mentors for some of our students every day, when we're making plans with them. And then keeping their families up to date on where they are in their attendance contract. Once we get to tier 3, we can rely on some of the district supports. We'll do home visits. We'll pull out all the stops, because ultimately I want our kids to show up and I want them to be successful. And I don't want to just say, well, this one's we'll just let this one withdraw. So we're still working on it, but I've been really proud of our efforts and attendance, and we've seen a great deal of success this year.
We hold monthly digital learning collaborative calls, and we were having this very same discussion about engagement and quote unquote screening, and several people were saying that similar point to what you were making. We don't do that with our traditional public schools, and shouldn't and can't. So it's a bit challenging to think in those terms for an online or a hybrid school. We have 15 minutes left, and so Tracy, saw your really good comment about attendance, combination, engagement, work completion. Love that. We actually haven't gotten to the question that is the title of our session. So given that we're starting to run short on time, I want to get to that, and then we've got about 15 different things that we'd circle back to if we had time. But let's start with this question of, are things different post-pandemic? Tracy, you were doing this. Wolf Creek was around pre-pandemic. What does your world look like now? Is it different than 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
I do think it is different. We just had a staff retreat yesterday, and we had a lot of discussions about that since the pandemic, our families, students, stakeholders are just asking for more personal attention, more, I call it like a la carte education. I think people got a taste of that in COVID, that I don't have to send my student to school 5 days a week anymore. They can take 2 classes at the local high school and be home in the afternoons with some flexibility. We see some schools going to a 4-day week. We see some schools, using Fridays or Mondays in a different way. And I think families are asking for more services. We have families asking, like I said, for a lot more check-ins, virtual check-ins, and time for their students to really have that one-on-one personal attention, which we want to give them. We're a small school. We intentionally stay small, under 250. But even with that, my staff are saying, this is a lot of work. How can we continue to group students together and still have people have that personalized attention? So we had a lot of discussions around that yesterday, and a lot of discussions around the topic, like none of us have the answer to what happens when we have these great tiered supports and we're ready to go, and we have amazing lesson plans and we've pre-assessed, and we have a teacher in a Hangout link and the student doesn't show up. So we had this really vibrant conversation yesterday about how long we stay in the session, between 5 minutes and 17 minutes. And I think students have to catch up to that too, that it is flexible. Our students want that flexibility. Our families want that flexibility. Adults are doing more telecommuting and working from home, but it still is school. And there still needs to be the times that you're receiving those interventions, and there are consequences to not showing up, like not passing classes. We have a high school not graduating on time, truancy interventions for our younger students. And they're not things we want to talk about. They're not where we all want to spend our time, but sometimes we do go there. So I think those are the big changes, that families are really savvy about peers and 504 plans, and this is what we need, and this is what my student wants, and just being really able to verbalize those pieces much more.
We're seeing some of that in some national surveys. Interesting that you're experiencing it as well. Michelle, the question is a little bit different for you, since your program didn't exist pre-pandemic, right?
Right, but I've been in online learning, and so I feel like I can see the changes that happened pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And I would say the biggest thing for me, especially thinking about the younger students, I have elementary and middle school. Before COVID, most online schools and programs that I was familiar with were almost completely asynchronous, really leaning into competency-based instruction and flexible pacing for students. And then COVID happened and everyone went online. And all of a sudden, all of these teachers and principals and educators had to become an online teacher overnight. And so I think it's perfectly reasonable that what we saw happen was, we're going to try to replicate what we do in person. And so what that means is I'm going to have my whole class in a Zoom, and I'm going to try to do class. And so that now is what online learning is, right? The biggest difference between 2019 and 2023 is not that options exist now, it's that everyone knows options exist. So we have a whole new group of students and families that are entering online schools And what they believe online learning looks like is Zoom. And that's how they know their kid is working. And that's how they know that they're in attendance. And I would say that that push for synchronous has been our biggest obstacle, also the biggest positive pressure for us. Because simply, sorry, flying here. I would say, I love live webinars. So it's been kind of a balance, replicating live instruction in a Zoom for a whole class. That's not what good online learning looks like. It will never be anything more, I always say, than a cheap imitation of in-person instruction, if that's all we're doing. However, it has forced us to have really intentional conversations about what's the best use of my time live and what can I do asynchronously. And then if I had to prioritize and make the most of my limited live time with students, what are we doing? And I think it's made us better. And I think it's overall made online programs better.
And you touched on the elementary and the younger students aspect. It feels to me like that's something that's certainly come out of the pandemic as well, just that increased interest from younger students and the families of younger students, which seems to be a significant part of your program. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. And I'm new to the township with Warren Online Academy, but I can safely say that as they were thinking about creating online options for their students before the pandemic, they were not thinking about kindergartners. That has definitely helped us or forced us to shift our thinking.
I'll put this question to any of you three who wants to pick it up. It feels to me like one of the other things that is clear coming out of the pandemic is there's teacher shortages in all sorts of places. Most of the online and hybrid schools we know of aren't experiencing similar teacher shortages, and so it seems like there teachers are interested in these in your types of schools, and maybe some of that is tied to the fact that several of you have mentioned these different advisory roles. Teachers have different roles, and there's different roles also for maybe people who used to be teachers and now they're in a different professional role. Anybody want to comment on that?
I can. I know.
Go for it.
It feels like bragging, honestly, to say that we're not experiencing quite as bad the effects of the teacher shortage. I still don't have as many applicants for each position that I want, but I think a lot of teachers are interested in doing things differently too. There are a lot of challenges that come with teaching online, but there are a lot of challenges with teaching in person too. So this has been a good fit for a lot of students and for a lot of teachers too.
Yeah, that's my sense as well. Tracy, what are you finding about teachers?
Yeah, I was just typing in the chat. I was just saying, like, I have and we're a small school, so we don't have a ton of openings. But we have received resumes from people, and the cover letter I opened last week just said I was not really looking for a different job, but I really would love to return to virtual learning, hybrid learning, read your school's philosophy, really interested. So yeah, it makes me feel bad, kind of like Michelle said, when I hear from other charter school director colleagues, like, we have 10 openings and I have nobody. And I mean, we don't have hundreds, but we're doing really well with retaining staff and being able to be able to collect resumes. I think the hybrid model really is the perfect place for teachers to say, like, I don't know that I want to be virtual 100% of the time. My staff say, I love seeing students on Tuesdays and Thursdays and having the chess club and having that piece. I also love having all day Friday to grade and give really, amazing feedback, and some time on Monday for PLC activities, because teachers' days are really, really full. And if you look at other countries, around the world besides the US, there's just all this time that people have compared to what US teachers have. So I think that is attracting people and has worked really well for us. So yes, knock on something, but yes, it does seem like the students are know the options and opportunities are there, and so do the teachers. Teachers are saying we can do something different, and this might work for me, my family, my situation.
I love the point you just made. I think it's underappreciated, relatively unknown, the fact that the way most teachers in US public schools go class to class with one prep, it's not the norm in a lot of other places. We just have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of you for a parting thought. Dan, I'll go to you momentarily to start with your final closing thought. Once we're done with that, we'll put up your contact information for everybody, for our audience. Dan, I'll start with you. Final thoughts to leave our audience with?
Sure. Pandemic or no pandemic, I would say the essential elements to a good hybrid program, even an online program, make sure you outline the why of what you want to do. Make sure you have a good profile of as Michelle said, of a student, of a graduate, and also a profile of an educator in your system. And know that the humans are going to be an essential part of this. And if you put that weight there and let them know that interaction and the why together, and don't increase the load too much on your teacher by finding something that can help them do that, then you can do a lot of great things. And I'm here to help if someone wants to head down the hybrid path. That's what I love to do.
Thank you, Dan. Tracy, I'll go to you next.
Yes, I would say that, like, this is, heroic work. It's not easy. And my staff often says that, being personalized and innovative, even those of us who've been doing it for 20 plus years, we are reinventing it all the time. And after COVID too, I think there is this tendency to do things the way we've always done them because it makes us comfortable as human beings, and to replicate in a virtual setting what a face-to-face bricks and mortar school would look like. And I would say, give your teachers all the tools that they can to do the job well, and let them be innovative. And that's the key. They will do a great job for you, really and truly.
Excellent. Thank you, Tracy. Michelle, you get the final last word.
Awesome. So if you are, I think a lot of the conversations post-pandemic, I know a lot of school districts are talking about creating these options. And I found, online learning can feel pretty isolating. And I think the thing that's been so different for us as a school within a school district is that I'm a part of a district that's really embraced us and embedded us into the district. And that's made a world of difference. So as you're thinking about if building an online program or a school within a school, or even a new school within your community, to really lean into the supports that you already have in place, it's been a game changer for us.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. I love the game changer aspect. And from our perspective, with the collaborative, watching the number of districts that have launched online or hybrid schools during the pandemic or after, and I'm not just talking about remote learning, but it seems like the number of district run online and hybrid schools roughly doubled coming out of the pandemic. And I think that is fantastic. Folks, the contact information for our panelists is up there. Dan, Tracy, Michelle, thank you so much for joining and sharing. And your info is up there, so you may get some emails. I appreciate all that you've done today and all that you do for your schools and students in the field. Thanks very much. Hope to connect again soon.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys. Peace and valor. How did John jump off that quickly? Oh.
I don't know, are we good, or do they want us to stay?
I don't know. It says
I
recording.
think John left.
He just dove out the window, I'm pretty sure.
I think he had another meeting. We're good. I thought it was good. Nice
It
to
was
meet
really
you
good,
both.
guys. Always great to see
Hey,
you guys.
thank you. Thank you, guys. I
Yes,
really
perfect.
appreciate it. I'm going to ask you, we'll wait a couple months, but I would like to redo this because I think a bunch of people got blocked out.
Yes, absolutely. No
We
problem.
had, some technical difficulties. And I think when Kel's blocked out, since we only had the names come in, I think when Kel's blocked, whoever came in as her, she probably blocked other people too.
Yeah, not a
So-
problem.
So
You know,
I will
you're
be
still
in
recording,
touch.
Denise. You know that you're still
I
recording.
know. Well, I couldn't
You can
figure out where it
flip it.
was.